make a joke here real quick. It's never name your child by the first name and call him by your middle name. And the reason why, when you go in the military, you're now called by your first name, and my whole life I'd gone by my middle name. So I went from being Harold David Wright as David Wright to Harold Wright in the military. So, but I was on David all my life, and they get up there in that morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, Harold Wright, you know, and all of a sudden it dawned on me they're talking about me. So anyway, that's my joke for the morning. Don't name your child something and call them by their middle name. So anyway, so during the military, everything you'll see is Harold D. Wright, not David Wright. Today I go by H. David Wright, but still, there we go. But anyway, David Wright, Harold David Wright, born June 13th, 1942, Rosine, Kentucky. That's on my birth certificate. And raised in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. That's were my 3 places. So I was drafted in January of 1964. Became MOS as an artist, believe it or not, exactly what I wanted. Sent to Fort Gordon as an artist in training aids, and felt I wasn't being a soldier, so I volunteered to go to Vietnam in August of 1964, and bam, I was there in December 1964 as an advisor to the Vietnamese military, Army. Served till 1965, December 65, and came home. So that ended my military career, 2 years, 1 year and 11 months, basically.
So you were part of the MACV?
MACV, Military Assistance Command, yeah. And my job officially was advisor to the Vietnamese Training Aids Division, you know, which I never did do. So I worked in the Training Aids Division in Saigon, but I went all over the country doing a lot of different things. MACV was pretty loose back then. I voluntarily to be a soldier. That was the reason I volunteered for Vietnam, is I wanted to be a soldier, and I wasn't being a soldier as an artist at Fort Gordon, Georgia. And sure enough, my MOS took me over there, you know, so there I was. So while I was there, I volunteered and did different things. I went out with the Navy on riverboat at night, flew as a door gunner on a helicopter, was out with the Rough Puff Regional Forces, Popular Forces unit part of the time, and then my job actually, you know, my real job is MACV took me all over the country with different things. Trained with the Arvin, trained with the Montagnards up in 2 Corps. So it was a pretty special, varied job I had. It wasn't just being an artist sitting there drawing pictures the whole time. Basically, I was stationed in Saigon, you know, in the Military Command 3 Corps. And I worked with civilians primarily at that job when I was there, and they did training aids for the Vietnamese Army, military, all the military, and I worked with them, and you know, we did artwork for training aids. That's what it was. That was my official job, and that's what I was assigned to do for the year. But like I said, it varied quite a bit. I liked them people, and here's what's strange about that, or interesting, not strange. Up in 2 Corps in the mountains, the Montagnards were Nguy Tuong, Vietnamese mountain people, as we call them. And they were American Indians, basically. And even if my knowledge of American history and woodland Indians, I was fascinated by the fact how close to our woodland Indian culture, the 18th century, early 19th century, the Montagnards were. And I was up 2-3 months with them. And they wore breech clouts. They hunted with crossbows. They lived in long houses, just like the woodland Indians did, and their villages were picketed with fences, just like the 18th century woodland Indians were many times too. So that comparison I really resonated to, and I was eventually adopted into their tribe, which was I thought an interesting situation, and I was really glad to be quote adopted. You know, they did that. I liked them. They're good fighters. They really were. And they were I want to say outlawed by the Vietnamese people, but they were looked down upon because they were mountain people, i.e. they weren't cultured by any means. But they were good people. They good soldiers overall, and really enjoyed the time I spent with them. We were in a little compound up in Zuc My, which is up out north in the Trang in the mountains, for 3 months, I think, 2 months, 3 months.
Did you have any one particular Montagnard that you got close to?
No. Not at all.
But they just welcomed you in.
Didn't get close to anybody. I still got vivid memories. I think probably every Vietnam veteran or any war is going to have vivid memories, but mine was I flew to Oakland, got on a plane, flew to via Wake Island in the Philippines and landed in Saigon, and on a bus that had screens on the windows, and I wonder why the bus got screened on Tan Son Nhut Airport. Well, keep the grenades out, obviously, you know. So anyway, we were bused down to Cho Lan, put in our billets, temporary billets there. And here's the interesting thing about it. As I was, quote, an advisor to the Vietnamese military, we had in-country briefing, and there's about 30 or 40 of us sitting in there, and the sergeant says, we don't issue the Vietnamese anything we want to have to fight against. So everything they're issued is World War II and Korean War vintage, and you're issued the same thing as they are. So there you go. Went to the arms room, and there was M1 Garands, Thompsons, grease guns, BARs, everything WW2, 1911. And that's what I had to draw from. No AR-15s for us at all. I never saw an AR-15 till probably 6 or 7 months into country when the American forces, you know, came in '65. But I never served with American forces. I was always serving with the Vietnamese and go out with them. So carried a M2 carbine, a grease gun, and a Thompson, and that's my arms. So, well, that's what our arms room had in it, and that's what we had to choose from, yeah. And it worked, you know. And I mean, it's not an AR-15, but I mean, or M16 then is what they called them. But you know, our M2 carbines, M1 carbine, Korean War, WW2 war, you know, and it was fully automatic. So that's the reason they called it an M2 with 30 round mags, and we'd tape them together, you know, and have plenty of arms. Plenty of memory. I grew up in the country. I grew up with guns. We hunted and we fished. We did all of that. So guns, firearms are part of my life. Always have been. To go in the military and be issued a firearm is everyday stuff for us. You know, if we carried shotgun rifles, hunted squirrels, hunted everything in the world. In fact, in basic training, my brother and me both won the company trophy. We were the best shots in the basic training. But when we came home, I was blessed to come home to Tennessee, and the Vietnam, anti-Vietnam rhetoric in Tennessee was low. I was never spit on. I was never abused in any form one way or the other that I recall. Yeah, people protested, but not like they did in other states too. So I went back into a normal life. I went back to being an artist, had a good family, wasn't married, you know, my mother and my father and family supported us, so I came back home to a normal life, I call it. I do remember the first time that a car backfired. I went to the ground. So you do bring back some stuff, but that's another thing about getting older too. But still, coming back to a normal life, that's what I did. Put everything on hold, went out of my life. It was past. As I mentioned to you, Chuck and I knew each other for 50 years. We never talked about our service to each other. I knew he was there, he knew I was there. So until the last 15, 20 years, when it started coming out more and more so with people talking about it, it's been on hold, put away. And that's basically it.
Do you think your art helped you maybe usher in some of the healing or somehow compartmentalize your time in Vietnam?
Probably did, you know, as you well know, from Chuck and my show, I did drawings while I was over there and a couple paintings in my spare time. And they were of the war, you know, the people, soldiers, no combat scenes, I didn't do that. But I was recording what I was seeing all the time, you know, from 4 Corps to I Corps, all the way from the top to the bottom, and the things I was associated with, and I did that. Mostly of people, mostly of ARVN soldiers and people, kids and such. And I photographed a lot too. I bought a cheap little camera at the PX and I carried it everywhere I went. And I took a lot of shots during the year too. So I was making recordings too. I wish now that I'd done a lot more than I did. You know, there again, the time element and everything like that didn't allow it. But I did, and that was part of our show, you know, that we put on last year. Vietnam Then and Now, The Art of Chuck Creasy and David Wright. Yeah. And that was a culmination of 56 years of a longtime friend, fellow artist Chuck Creasy and I coming together and saying, Chuck went back in 2018, 50 years later, and found the country rewarding, advanced. The people were good to him. He was fascinated and taken with the country, and he started doing paintings today, Vietnam today. And he was here at the studio. I said, come here and let me show you what I did back in 1965. And I pulled out my drawings that I still have, and we come up with an idea, why don't we do a show then and now? And that's how that particular show came about. And his stuff is full color, rewarding, rich, just blows you away. And my stuff's black and white, i.e. then, compared to, what Chuck's doing today. So it was a long road there, a culmination of both of us coming back together after all these years, what he did, what I did when he was there in 68 and I was there in 65. And it was fruitful. It really was rewarding to me, and probably to both of us, because we've talked a lot about our service to each other since then. And I think that that's needed. I think a lot of veterans today need to talk about what they did, because we all just burrowed it down under a bushel basket for many, many years. Probably every war, same deal. I wouldn't say it's Vietnam at all. I think everybody harbors good and bad things they did. My service wasn't all that bad. I had it easy compared to a lot of other guys, even compared to what Chuck went through with his service. Mine is relatively easy. We both did our stuff, but at the same time, you bring it back and you turn it off and go back to normal life. You hope. A lot can't, obviously, for reasons. But mine, I support a family, friends here. Like I say, Tennessee was not one of those blue states. It's not even a color. That wasn't even a color, but it wasn't one of the states where the protests were rampant like they were in California and other states too. So I didn't have to put up with that. People I worked with, even World War II vets, they understood it. So I went back to work as an artist, fit right in, and went on with life. Well, to me, it was healing in a great way, because it brought something that had been in a drawer, multiple drawers through my life for 50-something years, that nobody outside my family had ever seen it. And yet, after Chuck and I got together and we decided to do this show in Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center, decided to host it, and we put it together. It brought back a lot of memories for both of us, but at the same time, it was good to bring it out and look at it, because a lot of that stuff I'd drawn, I'd seen, of course, and the photographs that were included in it brought back a lot of memories. So it was good for me, and I think it was good for Chuck, even though his paintings are today. It was a lot of a healing for what he'd gone through as well, to go back and see that, hell, this is not North Korea, it's communist, but for some reason Vietnam has matured and has been successful in a sense that, as much as we wished it was democratic instead of communist, it hasn't gone to the other side, not politically, but like North Korea, where people can't speak and live and so on. Two of his guides were Army soldiers. Now that means that they've got a job and they can do something to make money, so it's not totally communist where you got to work for the government totally in that sense too. But it was healing for him, it really was. His children went with him, and so they got to see a little bit. He went to his old fire base where he was. They wouldn't let him on it, but he saw it, from a distance. So that had to be really rewarding to him. I don't have any desire to go back, other than I would like to go back and see what happened to the Mountain Yards I served with. But the rest of it, Saigon and all of that, I don't have any desire to do that. There is. Jane and I were in North Carolina a couple months ago and decided, just off that, Googled it and found out, by golly, there they are. And it's Raleigh, I'm not sure exactly where.
Greensboro area?
Yeah, somewhere. And we went to see, because they got a museum there, and they were closed. So we didn't see anything that day we were there. But I would like to go back. I'd like to just see what, and like always, you Google, see what happened. The Montagnards apparently still have a presence in Vietnam, even though, for real, when I knew I was going to Vietnam, I read the history of Vietnam because I wanted to know where it's going and what it's going to do. So there you go. You know, the Chinese and the Vietnamese have been enemies for thousands of years and so on. And that the Montagnards were looked down upon the Vietnamese people for whatever reasons. I won't even get into that, even to the extent that they bombed their villages if they had leftover ordnance. I read that, you know, then. This is in 1964, I'm reading this, that they'd bomb their villages if they had leftovers. So you got that problem with that and so on. The Americans came in and we became advisors to them, you know, in that sense, and taught them how to fight. And I got some good memories of those guys, but still, and the whole families too, men and women both. Still, that whole connection to the Montagnards and the American Indian just resonated with me at the time about how similar the comparison of the two cultures really are there and here, you know, at the time.
And have you always been passionate about the American Indians?
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. We have, and of course, as you know, I paint history, American history, and Indians as part of my paintings that I do today. Yeah. So, came back home and went back to life and eventually got married in a few years and had 2 good kids, still got 2 good kids. They got paying jobs, you know, but life goes on, and here I am at 80 years of age, 57 years later, still doing good. Well, yeah, I can remember not the exact day, but I remember when it was, and it's, there again, we're going from 1965 to 1991, so we've got 30, rather less than 30 years there. But during Desert Storm, when the troops went over there, and I think in 90 days they went in, they got their job done, they came home. That was the first time that anybody ever thanked me for my service. People actually acknowledged servicemen and thanked them for it, and it's still going on today, from 91 till 2022. People run into them if they know you served and thank you for your service. I don't say that to other servicemen because I thank them for their time in country, wherever it was. But maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but any acknowledgement of thanking a veteran or a serviceman for their service is good, obviously that. Still, it's an acknowledgement. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and I say that. But to the guys who served in these countries, it's not just their service, it's the time that they were there. That's what I acknowledge, regardless of the war.
This is as a result.
It does. And as you and I were earlier discussing, I've always thought that the Korean War veterans are the ones that got the short end of the stick. They've never been, to me, adequately acknowledged for what they did during their war. And I call it the forgotten war, you know, in that sense. Today, it's very cliche to be a Vietnam veteran, you know, and it's just due. I'll take it, you know, but we're not the only veterans, God almighty. You got the Vietnam War, you got the WW2, you got Korea, and you got Dominican Republic. While I was in Vietnam, they went into Dominican Republic and had a little short war down there, and those guys came home, some were killed, you know, it's a war. Those guys served in it. Same stuff happened there that happened in every other war, and you never hear of it, you never know of it. You know, all wars, however big, however small they are still the same to every veteran, you know. Every war is the same, every war is different. That the fact that people even acknowledge veterans today is good. That's a plus, you know, because it's an all-volunteer army today. It was a drafted volunteer army when I went in, of course, back then. I had no choice. Well, I could have gone to Canada, but I didn't. But it was an honor for me in 1964, as my older brother Don got drafted 2 years before I did, that was part of our upbringing. It's what we expected to do, you know, that's the way it was, and we did it. We didn't run from it. The fact that I wound up in Vietnam was a different thing. I came home in one piece. You know, I had my little tips here and there, but still, a lot of guys didn't. And a lot of guys didn't come home at all. And a lot of people carry that with them the rest of their lives. I'm fortunate that I don't have to. I saw my share of stuff, okay. But I haven't experienced a lot of unknown stuff that other guys were too, that's carried that the rest of their life. So I'm fortunate in that sense. But still, from that standpoint of it, it's just a part of our lives. We did what we did. We got that done, and we came home. And today, the guys that join the military, they're not drafted, thank God. And they go do their job well, and they do it and come home, and some stay in, some get out. So that's to be expected. You made your choices, and that's what they are. And for people to acknowledge that today is definitely a plus, in my opinion. I'm glad of it. And that's my response. You know, when they say thank you, I just said I did my job, and that's it. And I think probably most vets feel the same way. You know, and we're not standing up asking for kudos and everything for going and doing our job. The war itself was one issue. The coming home and the protesting and everything else was a separate issue entirely that we dealt with. And most of us just turned our back on it and came back to real life, as we call it. And with that being the case, so did every other veteran in every other war. You know, you're there, you're done, you came home, and life goes on. And that's what we did too. My opinion, that's what we did. Certainly did with me. And the guys that I know, you know, that served, did the same thing. I mean, life's real. You know, that's then, and this is now, or, you know, that even when you come back home, this is now. So you get on. Everybody before us did the same thing. Why should we be any different? You know? Well, do realize I came home December '65. The war, when I got there, we had 20,000 people in the country. When I left, there's 200, and it eventually built to 500 and more. So in December of '65, American troops came in, March of '65. I remember every unit that came in. When they came in, the Marines came in March. We flew air cover for the 173rd in their first assault. But by December of '65, the protesting was just really ratcheting up. Those guys that served 66, 68, 70s, they're the guys that got the crap when they got home. Maybe that's the reason why when I got off that airplane in Nashville, there wasn't anybody out there protesting for me. Now, they did protest later in Nashville. Some people I knew did some protest. Nothing like what was going on in California and other stupid states. But all in all, you know, life went on here pretty normally for us. And I don't know what happened in '67, '68 as far as the protesting went. Because I never watched the news. I guess in a sense I ran from it too, like some others say they did. I wouldn't watch the news, period. It was put on the past for me, and I went on with life. So whatever went on in Vietnam, I never saw it on the news at all. No, I guess I ran from it too. You hear nothing about the Afghan and the Iraq veterans today, zero. At least I don't. I mean, I watch the news a whole lot more today than I used to. But those guys came and went and come back home and just disappeared, don't they? At least there's no protest amount to it, but they went and did their job just like we did. And they deserve the praise and the honor that goes along with that, because it's all fighting for somebody else's country, by God, not here on our country. But as I believed, you know, in '65, and I wrote a letter to the newspaper, I remember writing a letter to people I work with in the newspaper, because that's where I worked, wondering why they were protesting, because the people I talked to there did not want to be communists, and we were there to help them not become a communist country. So I believed in what I was doing was right. I believed in what they were doing was right. They did not want to become under communism. So my whole year was there as I believed in what I was doing. And it's that simple. Came home, still believe that today. I don't think this is relegated just to Vietnam, period. You know, the WW2. Go back to World War I, World War II, Korea, all the in-between little actions that take place. Like I said, you come back home to real life, as we call it, and it goes away, hopefully, okay? And people don't talk about it. Now, in my case, and Chuck's case too, even I use Chuck as an example because we've been friends ever since the war. And I never asked, I knew what he did, but never asked any questions about what did you do until recently. I found out a whole lot more about what he did. It was a lot worse than what I had to go through, and vice versa. So you put it out of your life and it goes away, hopefully. So nobody ever came to me and asked me about the war other than family, and that, not much of that either. And I think that's probably pretty normal when you think, until you started interviewing. That's the first interview I'd ever done about the war, until you interviewed us. And so why would you not talk about it when you ask the question, just like we're doing right now? But they're there, they're underneath their skin all this time, they're probably a lot more veterans would like to share their stories if somebody would listen to them. So with that being said, when with you interviewing and you came and you interviewed vets for 2 days, and Chuck and I were the second day, right? And then I asked you, however it worded, what time did you get through the day before us? And you said 7 o'clock, I think, right? I said, why did it take you to 7 o'clock? And you said, because you guys like to talk. And it dawned on me at that point, you're the first person that's ever really asked me anything about those years ago. So why wouldn't we, so late, like to share our stories, whatever they may be, good or bad, hopefully good, with somebody that's actually interested in asking you to talk about what happened that nobody else really has cared to ask about. There again, Chuck, as well as me, never joined the Vietnam Veterans Association or the VFW or any Veterans of Foreign Wars or any organizations, period, through all those years. Never wanted to, never cared to, didn't have a reason to. We both now belong to the local chapter of Vietnam Veterans Association, and I find it interesting and rewarding to sit down and talk to the guys about what'd you do, where were you at, and some of the most unique stories, like Captain Barry Rice, where Black Virgin Mountain, hell yeah, I was shot down there. I was there, so you find these things out that you wouldn't know unless you talked about it, so it came out with that. Well, I would imagine, and I don't belong to any groups, I flew as a door gunner with 197th Gunship Company, and they've got their group, but I wasn't a gunship. I was a volunteer, what we call a strap hanger. I'd go out and fly with them and then go back to my job and come back. Flew 100-something missions with those guys, good bunch of guys. We did a lot of stuff. But I don't belong to their organization because I wasn't a 197th Aviation. I don't know of any organizations out there that relate to MACV personnel. They may be, I've never been a joiner of organizations to mount anything. So when you talk about guys getting together and talking about where were you and what were you, it's funny, even though different years, you overlap relationships. Like that mission we flew on Black Virgin Mountain, the Special Forces camp was surrounded by VC. So we flew gunship cover for an armed insurgent. And I was at Lowe's 2 years ago. Guy had a Vietnam cap on it. Where were you? He said, Black Virgin Mountain. He was in that camp. You need to cut this stuff out. But it's crap getting older, But he was there when we flew that mission in 65. And it's like Barry saying he got shot down in Black Virgin Mountain too at 68. But what he went through with that. So all of a sudden you got these connections to people in a country from a long time ago. Everybody has different stories, and some are really bad, and some are like Captain Rice, wounded and took him years, and he suffered from it forever and ever and ever. Agent Orange, is a big issue today with veterans, Vietnam veterans, and that was something that was never discussed, talked about, known about at all, and probably a lot of people died from it that had no idea until the military finally started acknowledging it. And I know some guys now who've died from diseases that they attribute to Agent Orange. And even the other day when Bill Pereira and I went in he's a Korean War vet, because of our hearing to the VBA, to the Veterans Administration, because we got hearing aids. and went back to try to get disability. I say try to get disability. See if they would increase our disability because of our hearing problems. But anyway, now all that's surfaced is I've had heart issues that he said that could be related to Agent Orange. No, not really, but that's what they're going to investigate. Who knows nowadays? There's so many diseases now that, quote, could have been related to Agent Orange, you know, to it. We'll see where that goes. I'm not one way or the other. But anyway, that whole thing about life goes on and things keep coming back to you. In my sense, I have no problem with what I did 57 years ago at all. Did my job, and that's what it is. Yeah, there was some bad shit, but everybody goes through that. Not bad stuff. Cut. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh yeah. Clean up my mouth here. You know? Yeah. Mostly my parents, you know, and I've got 50-something letters up there Mom saved that I wrote, and I've never read them. I keep saying I need to read that, but I keep feeling like I'm going to appear to be a dumb shit, you know, excuse me, dummy, because I do recall I never related to them what I did. I made a point of not wanting to cause any problems with them thinking, you know, that I was that. So I don't know what I wrote about. Hey, it's a good day, whatever, I don't know. But anyway, the letters are there bundled up right now, you know, and I never read them. Girlfriends, you know, and stuff. But still, I don't recall writing about the crap that went on all the time. Why would you? I just didn't want to worry them, you know, about what's going on. They're looking at the news, wondering where is he related to this, and this. But of course, you got to realize too, that in 1965, when the American troops came in numbers, then the whole war blew up compared to what it was from December when I got there to March. Like I said, there was only 20,000 advisory and support units there. And even though the war was the war, it wasn't like from 65 on to the end of it, boom, it was big. So they wouldn't have any idea where I was at the time or what went on, though some of it overlapped. And the only time I ever fought with an American unit was when we supported the 173rd in their first search and destroy operation as a door gunner with a helicopter. You know, when they inserted, the rest of the time it was all armored stuff we were flying cover for.
And you volunteered to be a door gunner, correct?
Yeah, we could do that. Gave a door gunner a day off. Those guys were my heroes. Those pilots, those door gunners, those Hueys.
That's what they say.
They did some stuff. They were good. We called them cowboys, and they were cowboys. And I can relate that to when I went out to check in one morning, and the warrant officer was standing there, and of course I know guns, you know. Sir, what do you got on your hip there? You know, because we all carried sidearms. I carried a 1917 Colt revolver, and he said, it's a Colt, hell, what's the name of the gun? Oh, golly, we have to back up on this because the name just went right out the window. It's a Colt long-barreled pistol. It's a new Colt, but it's 1878 Colt buntline special. It's got a barrel this long. I said, that's a buntline special, isn't it? And he said, yeah, it is. So he's got, rather than the 1911 and everybody was issued, you know, he's got a Colt buntline special on his side. Sir. So he pulled it out and let me look at it. And sure enough, that's what he carried for his sidearm. He was a cowboy. He's a good pilot too. Boy, they were hell-nacious pilots. They could fly those things. You know, really could. Yeah. Well, that saying, you know, that I had on a T-shirt that we had printed up for our show, beats to the heart of a Vietnam veteran and doesn't quicken the sound of a helicopter. If there's one phrase in the whole war that says it all, that's it to me. And I lived by that, and all of us did, because you can tell a Huey when it pops the tree line. We can't, you know, and still today we do. And that fact that 2 Vietnam pilots flew us into our show really was meaningful. And then the fact that helicopter went down and was crashed and everybody's killed later was a sad situation. Boy, but what a treat to get flown into our show in 2021, you know. And both of those are Vietnam pilots, and they had stories. Of course, Robert has 2 books out on him. You know, he flew Chinooks, and then Mike flew Hueys. You know, with the he flew Hueys with, wasn't CIA. What was the other unit that flew in Vietnam? Civilian, not military unit, but he probably flew the last Huey out of the embassy when it was abandoned. Pretty well talking to him about it, I believe he did. You know, said he flew 16 hours that day. And they were, boy, stories I could tell you about those guys are remarkable. And of course, my 100-and-something missions was nothing compared to what they flew. You know, the number of missions they flew in a year's time, all of them. I flew as an observer at times, you know, with them too, and so, but that was minimal, really. Most of it was door gunner. But there again, you know, the number of missions, I flew 30, 40 times, I don't know. They flew thousands of times, you know, so they got many, many, many hours. And they, you know, we lost crews, yeah, that I flew with, but that's the way it goes. Well, I don't know what to really cover. Like I said, I don't have all the stories that a lot of guys have, because my job is relatively easy overall compared to other people too. Like I said, to me, I'll say this, because if you were in country, there was no safe zone. There were safer zones, but there was no safe zone. You could get zapped walking down a street in Saigon, which they did. I pulled a lot of bodies out of a lot of buildings that got blown up, civilians and military too. So to be there was different probably than any other war up to that time, because most other wars had fronts and lines and so on. And of course there were battles and such as that. You went in, but it didn't matter where you were. The enemy was walking right beside you in civilian clothes all the time. And I know that from a fact. So kids blew up people. They put grenades in school kids' satchels, and the kid would run up to you and blow you up. Bicycle moms, I can relate a lot of that stuff that went on that's not, quote, living in the bush, you know, doing what all of the infantry guys did, but it was there. So everybody that was there took their chances. So some more so than others, and obviously that some are safer than other places too. But it was a different war, it really was. It really was. The people were good, you know, to me. Like I said, I worked with civilians, both civilian Montagnards, civilian military Montagnards, and military Arvins, and even went out with the Navy on one of their night patrols, and that was a different game altogether. You know, God Almighty, it's dark out there on that river, you know, at night. And they're patrolling down it with no lights, and so I guess with all wars, it has its different aspects of it, some better, some worse. I came home in one piece without any more than I cut myself open one time cleaning my machine gun. Yeah, but still, you know, the other guys have endured a lot more and carried it home with them, brought it home for the rest of their lives. It's got to be something to think about. It really does. But we're still here. That's what's important. Well, maybe so. You know, everybody's got a different story, that's for sure. And a lot went through a lot worse stuff than others did. But we were all there. And if we're still here, you know, this long time after, that's good. And a lot are not. A lot are gone for a lot of reasons, not only just longevity of life, but Agent Orange, you know, and other things too. The suicide rate and all of those things that contribute to the guys being gone today. And women too, I say guys. Women were there. And because I believe in God, I'm a Christian, I've been baptized, and I believe in all that, and I believe if I die, I die. And I've got my peace with my Lord, and had that all my life. And even recollecting then, whatever you did every day, if you didn't make it through the day, you just didn't, I'm good to go. I didn't have a problem with that, you know, so that never was an issue with me. It really wasn't. So, believe in the Lord, and I got good kids that believe in the Lord, and a wife too, so I'm blessed all the way around. I really am. live in the best country in the world too, even though there are a lot of people out there who would say differently. We don't agree, obviously, but we'll get through this. We have and we will, obviously, too. Just glad that you're here, you know, taking the time to do this, you know, because, like I said, for 50 years, I don't know how many other people probably have ever been asked any questions or interviewed or sit down and say, do this. Nobody has, and you're doing it. And so you're making history in the sense you're recording what we did and recall or recollect, and that's good. Wherever it goes from here, when you're gone and I'm gone and somebody else has got it, at least it'll be here. And I appreciate you doing that. I can't thank you enough for that. You know, and there's going to be more wars and there's going to be more problems and more people that involve themselves in it, obviously, always will be. And just thank God for the people who've taken the time to record that, all the way back to every war, you know. War between the states, you know, the Indian Wars. I read that stuff. History's always been a big part of my life, because that's a basis of what we're all about, is our history. You know, what people did before me is what's given me the latitude, the right, and the ability to live what we do today. You know, true. Well, if we didn't have that, both in the written word, obviously before, you know, filming and all of that became available, just what would we know about our history, about our past? And that's come under the gun so prevalent today, is there's so many people who want to wipe out our past history. Our history is our history, good or bad, it's our history. And you learn from it, and hopefully you better yourself from it. But to say, do away with it and not acknowledge it, and not admit where you do good and where you do bad, is criminal to me. It really is. I'm sorry to say that it's criminal to me. We've got the best country in this world, hands down, without a doubt. I've been in a lot of countries around this world that are good countries, but I always want to come back here, and would glad I was born here. Really was. Really am. Thank goodness. Especially when you see it from the other side of the bad part of it, about communism and socialism and all of the things that go along with countries trying to take over other countries, you know, having been involved in that. And you come back home to safety and good country and plenty to eat and good friends. Don't take that lightly at all.